1-800-Flowers.com always has something fun and exciting to surprise her with. Right now, when you order a dozen multicolored roses for just $29.99, you'll get another dozen, plus a vase absolutely free. To order, go to 1-800-Flowers.com, click on the radio icon, and enter the code HERD, H-E-R-D. Doug Gottlieb in for Colin. Chris Broussard will join us in moments, and we'll ask him about the latest story in the messy divorce between Kyrie Irving and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Chris will join us on the couch here in about 10 minutes. Plus, with his take on the NBA All-Star Game selections, how that can be tweaked in the very near future. Jerry Jones was at the Senior Bowl, and I thought this was interesting. He had this to say in regards to how the Dallas Cowboys intend to play in the upcoming season.
We need to take advantage of what we have in Dak. A part of that will be expanding the playbook. I think that's what this offseason is about. I think that's what the position coach changes are about, is to change it up. I think you're going to see a lot more variation in terms of schemes, in terms of techniques.
That's what Jerry Jones said. What Jerry Jones meant is, like, look, the idea of is it expanding the playbook if we have more designed runs for Dak Prescott, if we have Zeke Elliott healthy and not suspended for the entirety of the season. Right? You don't want to expand. You want to contract. Did they have issues with Dak fitting into the offense? I guess. But part of the problem is the personnel, right? Is a new scheme going to make Dez Bryant 5 years younger or Jason Witten 5 years younger? Like, Cole Beasley's got a rap album. You release a rap album. You kind of jump the shark as the underneath slot wide receiver. The personnel issues, which start with the quarterback, obviously he feels like can't be fixed or can't be changed or will not be changed. But until they do, what's the purpose of expanding? There are no magical plays. Well, what I want you to do is have some magical plays that make Dak Prescott a better quarterback. That's not going to happen. Not going to magically read defenses. You might throw it up to Dez a little bit more if you keep Dez. You get him to renegotiate his contract. I mean, until they tell Jason Witten, hey, dude, we got to go get another tight end to hide your lack of speed and elusiveness at this point in your career. Until they're able to convince Dez Bryant to maybe be a number 2 wide receiver, operate some in the slot, try and be Anquan Bolden. More so even than Larry Fitzgerald, when Larry Fitzgerald decided to not simply be out wide and say, throw it up to me. And for Dak, and I think Jerry knows this, but you can't say it, right? Jerry knows, hey, we can't give him more options, less options. Hand the ball off, look for your primary, maybe look for Witten, tuck it and run it. Simplify. Don't make it more complex. And anybody you bring in, and look, this happens, especially this time of year. It happens on college campuses, occasionally happens on pro teams as well. Every defensive coordinator who has ever taken a job, in the initial press conferences, a meeting with the media, you know what they always say? They always say, we're going to be more aggressive. Now, at this point in time, in 2018, if every new defensive coordinator was more aggressive than the last defensive coordinator, then they'd all be blitzing 99% of the time or 100% of the time, right? If you progressively get more aggressive, then eventually you just got to blitz every down. It's an impossibility. The idea is anybody to get a job is like, we're going to be more aggressive. Sounds great. Like, new sheriff in town, going to be more. Nobody says like, hey, we're just going to sit back, play super passive, just let the other team make mistakes. Even though at times that's exactly what you do. You know? No offensive coordinator is going to come in and say, you know what we're going to do is we're going to dummy down this offense. We're going to simplify things. We're just going to hand the ball off 3 yards in a cloud of dust and occasionally on third down, run play action. Okay? Look, it worked for the Jaguars. Blake Bortles stinks. Dak Prescott's modestly better than Blake Bortles. Our overall personnel is better than the Jaguars. Our running back is better, more diverse. You know, our overall team, we think we can do more things. But that's a pretty good game plan. Simplify. Don't make it a more expansive playbook. But you can't say that to get the job. You can't say that to convince Jerry Jones, and Jerry Jones can't say that, even though we all know it to be at least a good portion of the truth. It ain't that hard. Get the ball to Zeke. Look up, somebody's open, great. If not, run it, because you're a really good athlete and you're a really good runner in college. And you're not great at going through progressions and being a super accurate throw guys open passer. It's not who you are. No one who's watched the Cowboys play said, you know what they need? They need a more expansive playbook for Dak Prescott. But that's exactly what Jerry Jones tried to convince us of, right? Well, now that's the personnel changes we're making. Now, you can look for us to be a more dynamic offense and really try and, like everybody wants, like, why can't we go get Sean McVay? Sean McVay, where he puts guys in different, you know what the difference is? First, they got better personnel. They were willing to part ways with their guys, make some trades, go get Sammy Watkins and Robert Woods and go change some of the things they had. But they also, Jared Goff's a different, more accurate thrower. He may not be the competitor leader that Dak is, but he's a lot more accurate a thrower. I told you I sat in this very seat this summer, and people thought I lost my mind. I was like, look, Dak's going to have regression. He was a fourth-round pick for a reason. And I think some of that doesn't mean that he'll always be a fourth-round pick, that he won't eventually elevate himself. But if you watched him this year, there's a lot of, that's why people weren't as high on him as they were on Goff. Water has found its level some, both in Los Angeles and in Dallas. And in Philadelphia, right? Like, that's why Carson Wentz went well ahead of him. Carson Wentz can run, is big, is strong, but all of those things that Dak does well, Carson Wentz does better. He just is better. That's why one would have been the MVP of the league had he not gotten hurt, and the other one had a little bit of a disappointing season and lost his running back, and his wide receivers aren't as good as they used to be, and his tight end's not as good as he used to be. That's what the Cowboys have to deal with. How do we, now that we have a full assessment, a complete rundown of just the pluses and minuses to how good Dak is, and Dak is going to be our quarterback, how do we put the best system around him in order to get the best out of him? And I don't think a more expansive playbook is the way to do that. You're right, Jerry. You're right. The problem last season was you didn't have enough crossing routes, right? You didn't have enough trips. That's the reason that the Cowboys didn't make the playoffs. Let's get to Christine with the news.
No. Heard on the news. This is the Herd Line News.
The first Tom vs. Time episode came out on Facebook. That's Tom Brady's documentary, which I'm very excited to watch a lot of it. And in the first episode, he revealed that he keeps his Deflategate suspension letter with him to serve as motivation. And here's a clip.
2007. Oh, God. It's not a great ending to that year. I'm pulling out a bad ending. I had to pull out a happy ending. 2015, 2014. Oh, right here. 2016. So I still keep this. My suspension letter that I received. Just a nice way to remember. Thank you.
Roger, I got a ring. How do you like them apples? That's what it felt like to me.
Did you watch that?
Did I watch the Tom versus Time?
Yeah.
No.
Are you going to?
Yeah, I think I will now. Now I'm kind of into it. Do you have any rejection letters?
I was literally just going to say the same thing. Do you keep anything like that?
I
Yes.
actually do. It's a little bit. I'll share it with you in a second, but go ahead.
No, I have a letter. I'm not going to say which employer it was, but I have a letter that was outlined and pretty critical.
Really?
Yeah, and I remember,
I have a couple emails like that
I remember being really mad at the time and thinking that it was BS, which I like criticism, but this I thought was BS, and I left, and then that news director got fired. So, you.
Yeah, you want me to share mine?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I've never shared this before on national TV or national radio. I had to leave Notre Dame because I used 3 credit cards that were not my own. And I bought, one of the things I bought, as embarrassing as doing that and getting caught was, I bought a gold bracelet with it. No, it's terrible. A gold bracelet? Seriously. Come on. Who does that?
You wanted a little swag?
It was 1996. It was bad. But I have kept the gold bracelet. It is in my dresser, and I've only worn it once since. I wore it when I worked the Final Four at CBS. Because I was like, you know what? Bottom of the barrel, top of the heap.
That's really interesting.
So I still have it. Maybe next time I host a show upcoming in a couple weeks, I'll wear the gold bracelet second time.
They didn't make you give it back?
No, when you get caught stealing something, you have to pay what's called restitution. So I paid for it. Trust me, I keep paying for it on Twitter. When anytime I commented something like, "Why'd you steal credit cards?" Like, why don't you grow up? It was 20 years ago. Anyway, no, you have to pay back like 2.5 times whatever the value was anyway. So like, I paid for it. Like, I mean, I could melt it down and make it into something else, but why? It's kind of meaningful to me.
No, that is meaningful. I like that. We actually
That surprised you.
We were working that same tournament, I think, right?
Yeah.
I think that's when you were in the Final Four.
Yeah.
I did the sidelines for that one. Yeah,
this is true.
I had a moment like that as well.
Good.
Not that I stole anything, but
Got it.
Same kind of thing. The Cowboys are talking about keeping their offense Dak-friendly, as you just mentioned, and that likely means handing the ball off to Ezekiel Elliott. Well, Stephen Jones was talking about Ezekiel Elliott recently, and he said that he wants him to have less distractions.
I know Zeke wants to be great. I'm convinced of that he wants to be great. He's also got to understand to be great, you got to, you can't have these things that we call distractions and things of that nature that, take away from not only him, but more importantly, our team.
Yeah, I'd call it more of it's more than a distraction, but I do hope that he doesn't do things like this anymore. That would be good for the world and for football.
Yeah, look, he killed their chance to make the playoffs with the suspension. And the suspension, however much you believe his accuser's story, a lot of what went into the suspension, there's a lot of other stories. So I think what Stephen Jones saying,
we saw on camera him pull a girl's shirt down.
Right.
So.
Now, look, his defense was like, we still made out that night anyway. Like, then really, ends don't justify means there. Okay, so point is, hey, dude, you're so talented. You're so important to this team. Just clean it up.
Yep.
And if you do, you're going to be Ring of Honor. You're going to be in the Hall of Fame, and we're going to be in the playoffs. I don't think that's unreasonable. Distractions is such an ambiguous term that I think we all knew what he meant.
Yeah, I would like them to acknowledge the fact, though, that some of their players are more than just distractions, but, a later date. So the NBA draft happened last night for the All-Star game, which you agree with us, it should have been televised. Absolutely should have been televised. I think they actually should have done it right before tip-off and just done it like high school dodgeball style, and then they have to go to their respective teams, they get handed a jersey, and that's that.
Like done it on the big screen, like in all these arenas, like guys are sitting around watching. That would actually be amazing that you could do that.
Live TV, also on the Jumbotron, minutes before tip-off, do your draft right there.
I do like that, although the West Coast teams would be sitting around there in their locker room, but okay.
I think this would be great. So on Team LeBron, the starters are LeBron, DeMarcus Cousins, Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving. Team Steph Curry is Steph Curry, Giannis Antetokounmpo, DeMar DeRozan, Joel Embiid, and James Harden. So LeBron chose Kyrie, and he is saying that choosing Kyrie was an easy decision.
I just try to pick the best available players, and to be able to team up back with Kyrie, it's always special, and along with Kevin Love, just, for us to have another weekend and bring back some of the memories that we had when we were all together. So, Kyrie was available on the draft board. He's one of the best point guards that we have in our league. So, it was an easy choice for me.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit already, but I don't buy it. I think that...
Well, the Kevin Love thing, to me, is really hollow because, remember, Kevin Love got called out in the team meeting. What you didn't hear about in the team meeting, and you haven't heard afterwards, was LeBron James going, no one should ever question Kevin Love.
Right?
Kevin Love has played in 2 straight finals, would have played in the other finals had he not dislocated his elbow or whatever with Kelly Olynyk.
Yeah.
There was no defending of Kevin Love like Kevin Love's his boy. So
Nobody.
you can pick guys in your all-star team, but that doesn't make up for how you treated them every day.
That's a really good point. And no one has stood up for Kevin Durant, Kevin Love, by the way. And
that's because nobody likes Kevin Love, though.
But still, could you imagine if players started calling out LeBron for not really being hurt on the days that he sits out? We would never hear the end of it.
Would never hear the end of it. That's Christine with the news.
Well, that's the news.
And thanks for stopping by.
The Herd Line News.
You know him, obviously, from all of our Fox Sports shows. You saw him on Undisputed earlier today. And, of course, you can hear him weekends on Fox Sports Radio. His Chris Broussard. He joins us now in the Herd. Was not selected in last night's NBA All-Star media draft. Not sure if he's aware that that
I
took
would
place.
be the number one pick in the media draft. That's not saying much, but
You'd be selected ahead of me? Or NBA guys that cover, like, yeah, I think you'd go ahead of Windhorst. I think you go ahead of Woj. The former players, I think, where do they fit in that mix?
we played with Brent Berry. Was Brent or John? It was Brent. Brent Berry and Grant Long once. We actually beat their team. I was playing the team. We beat. It was me and a bunch of writers.
Was there money on the line?
No.
But then it doesn't matter,
But
right?
we beat them.
That's the whole thing with this. Like, I know we're making a big deal. I don't really the NBA All-Star Game is probably the best of the All-Star games, and it should be the best because they should be able to be competitive, but they're not. They don't guard anybody, and so while they're unbelievably talented, way more talent than there has ever been in the NBA, it still doesn't make it any better to watch.
I thought the All-Star Game used to be good.
Yes.
Up until about 4 years ago. And that was, I think it was in New York, was the first year I was completely turned off when Westbrook won the MVP. Nothing against him, but it became all three-pointers and wide-open dunks. If you look at the numbers, they jumped from like 70-something three-pointers combined to 108. 2 years ago, they took 139. Last year, 122. I believe there's a threshold to how many three-pointers you can take without ruining the game. Or whether it's a real game or an exhibition.
Sure.
I think it gets lazy. Basketball is not meant to be just a bunch of 30-foot shots. And so that's why I think the All-Star games become bad. And I don't know that I see that changing because the game is becoming more and more three-point heavy.
All right, let's get to a couple of the stories of the day in the league. The big one came out yesterday, which was that reportedly Kyrie Irving had said, hey, if you don't trade me, I'll just have knee surgery. I'll sit out the year. What's your reaction to that story?
I don't have any problem with Kyrie if that's what he did. It shows how much he wanted to get out of there. And maybe it was even a bluff. You know, I don't see it any different than a player holding out. And NBA players used to hold out before there was a rookie salary scale.
Sure. Guys
Would hold out. Steve Francis never went to play for Vancouver. You know, he forced them to trade him. Jimmy Jackson, who's our colleague here at FS1, he held out with the Dallas Mavericks. Ron Harper did it in Cleveland years ago. So that's not that unusual. I think that it was leaked from the front office because the front office is starting to look bad in a lot of people's eyes. People are ripping them for the trade, saying it didn't work. They're saying you didn't have to trade him. They're comparing him to San Antonio, which didn't trade LaMarcus Aldridge. The Lakers, who never traded Kobe Bryant. At the meeting where Kevin Love was called out, he was not the only one called out. It was a lot of guys called out, including the GM, Kobe Altman, who was there. And so now you're starting to catch heat as a young front office. I don't think it's any coincidence that this story was leaked.
Okay, so you have this story being leaked. You have the Kevin Love story being leaked. Like, you even have the story from Brian Windhorst, who said, you know, like, look, LeBron's mad that they didn't get Paul George, they didn't get Eric Bledsoe. You're hearing all these stories. None of them in any way call out LeBron James or Rich Paul in some of the decisions that they've made, pushing guys to get contracts. Doesn't that point to, at least on some level, some of these leaks come from his camp?
Well, I think the Windhorst information may have come from just talking with LeBron's guys. There's no question about that. As far as Woj's story about the Kevin Love, there's no way he got that from LeBron's guys. That didn't happen. There's no way that came from them. That may have come from an agent because, you know, agents leak a lot of this stuff. And, you know, players tell agents what happened at practice and games and locker room. So I think I would bet an agent, possibly front office. But if I had to bet, I would say an agent.
Okay,
or agents.
So, look, I'm willing to concede that some of this stuff goes on a lot of teams, right? Like the Kawhi Leonard with the Spurs thing. I think there's a lot of, you know, there's who was it? It was that Damian Lillard went and saw
Yeah.
ownership over the progress. Like this happens. There's a lot of unrest in the NBA.
The Clippers were a complete mess with Chris Paul there.
Right. So, but the litany of stories coming out of Cleveland, is that just the times we live in where this information is more readily available? Is it that this team has been to 3 straight NBA finals and it could be the last year? Or is it, dude, this is a dumpster fire? You got leaking stories. You got players only meetings. You've lost 6 of your last 7. Like, it feels like there's a lot more going on in Cleveland than is going on in most any other NBA team.
I think we care more. You know, again, if people don't care as much about Chris Paul's beefs with teammates, I mean, they care to some degree, but not like they care about LeBron James. You know, so I think, you know, anything involving LeBron is a lot more newsworthy and sensational, and people just are into it more. So I think that's one of the things. I do think that LeBron, with his passive aggressiveness, you know, has definitely spurred a lot of this over the past several years. Stories leak now way more than ever because of technology. Whereas years ago, it's hard to get 3 or 4 GMs on the phone in one day, you know, on the phone. But in terms of texting, you can always text with guys. And so I think that's why you see more leaks and more, you know, stories coming out that you didn't see years ago.
The NBA All-Star selections were not televised. I want to talk about that upcoming next with you, Chris, and show you what the exact reason they were not televised was, in fact, televised last night. That's upcoming next. Chris Broussard continues to join us. I'm Doug Gottlieb. This is The Herd.